Welcome, everyone, to Deep in the Plus. I'm your host, Rob Whiteside. Thank you guys, as always, for being with us. And you know the drill. If you have not already, please subscribe to WDWNT TV on YouTube for lots of great content, and also give us a like if you can. It helps people to find us. With me tonight is the one and only Mr. Ron Deanna. How are you, sir?
Aloha.
So you and I talked about Willow a while ago, and you were like, if we're gonna do Willow, you're gonna be on. So what is this? What is this movie? And obviously, the movie we're doing tonight is Willow, not the series. I'm not gonna want any spoilers for the series because I have not watched any of it. I know you have, so just like if you can hold back on the spoilers for that. But what is it about the original Willow that you are endeared to so much?
I think it was one of the first real fantasy movies, like live action. I remember like there was like Labyrinth and Dark Crystal, but something about Willow was different. I definitely remember going to the theater to see it with my dad, and uh, like it was a surprise. It was like, oh, you know, I always spend Saturdays with my dad, and he's like, oh, I got to take you. We're gonna leave a little early today. Put me in the car. I thought he had to take me home early for some reason, but we stopped. We saw Willow, and I actually we went to like I think Wendy's for dinner afterwards. So there's a um yeah, it's an old memory of that, and I just loved the movie. It was just a good fantasy epic.
So somehow the '80s were the era of the fantasy movie. We had Dark Crystal, we had Neverending Story, we had Black Cauldron actually happened during that era, and then we also had Labyrinth and Willow, and so it was like that age of that type of fantasy kind of medieval feel movie. So I got to tell you, I missed out on this one. I did not see Willow, and this is one of those things that I'm so happy that we get to do Deep in the Plus and kind of compare notes on things. So this was really my first time watching through this movie. I expect lots of shade in the chat, by the way, for only having seen this for the first time now. But really, it's one of those things where they kind of all blended together for me because I didn't watch any of them. I hadn't seen Labyrinth. I know that there's some joke about David Bowie, and I don't nod your head at me, man, about David Bowie and his bulge. There's this whole thing about Dark Crystal had a resurgence with the Netflix series, and then there was Neverending Story, Story 1 and 2. So what is it you think that was so? Why do you think the '80s were the time for this kind of fantasy science fiction movie?
Uh, I mean I think when Star Wars changed the genres in the '70s, and so at this point now you have the Henson Creature Shop, you have ILM, both at their best and farming out things at different times, and I think that's what led to a lot of this. I mean, those two groups were kind of involved in almost all the live action stuff at the time.
Yeah. Okay. And of course, this is a George Lucas, like this is from the mind of George Lucas, directed by Ron Howard. And so as I'm watching it, it's like it's got all the pieces. It's got music from James Horner. It's got Val Kilmer, and this was like I guess like the beginning or of the Val Kilmer era. It was a really it kind of all the things came together at once. I always think that about that 1989 Batman movie where it's Danny Elfman and Tim Burton and Michael Keaton and and Prince, and it all came together for that time. It was like this nice package. That's kind of the same thing with this one in this movie. So what this struck me while I was watching this movie, and tell me what you think about this. This kind of science fiction. This is a movie that takes place in kind of the equivalent of a galaxy far, far away, right? In a time that is not of our history. It's this other realm. Why is it that every time that happens, whether it's Game of Thrones or Willow or any of these others, that when these things happen, everyone's British?
I just think that's what Americans think every foreign accent is. I mean, you look at, anytime you just said a movie in Italy and everybody speaks like, they're just translating into English automatically, or, Hunt for Red October. That's just our generic foreign accent.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's just we have I guess some of it has to be the actors that were available in that thing, but it seems like anything in this time period, this period thing with this medieval vibe to it is always very, very British. So this movie, I honestly, it's kind of like I didn't know that. Again, I think Neko has already like said, "What, you hadn't seen this before?" No, and I hadn't, and theoretically, I'm not obligated to because it wasn't a Disney movie at the time. So, like, it was bought by Disney. It is now Disney because through Lucasfilm. And I've heard wonderful things about it. But I think this is one of those things where you kind of needed to capture it in the moment. You needed to be that, like you were doing, like that kid, right, that watched it when it was new and hot, and that was your youth. Or do you disagree?
Yeah, I mean, I think of all those movies, this might not have been the one that aged the best. I still love it, but like, especially some of like you see some of the green screen in here and some of the effects and things like. I don't know if it holds up as well as Labyrinth or Dark Crystal, just because of some of how much more live actiony or just adventure-y it was. The story was still there, but I know we're not talking about the series, but I think we don't know much about this world. We're just kind of thrown into it, and that carries on to the series, which they tell us even less, and it's just kind of making it up as they go. But I just something about it I don't think aged as well, and I think that's leading into the series part of. I think a lot of people are very split to weak on the series right now.
Well, and it's really funny. I was talking to somebody at my day job today, and I was mentioning the fact that we were going to do Willow, and they said, "Oh, did you see there's a new series?" And I guess we're so plugged into this community that we're like, okay, we already knew that this was a thing. And matter of fact, I think today was like the end of the series, right? The final episode dropped today.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna watch that as soon as this is over.
So it's an 8 episode series, and it's a continuation of, and it has Warwick Davis back as Willow, and kind of picks up from. But again, like I mentioned before, and we're not going to do any spoilers from that, but it is neat to see that kind of carries on. And to me, again, with a touchstone for me, is Tron, like the 1982 Tron. I've said over and over again, I probably wouldn't recommend that to anybody because it was during my youth that I watched that and I loved it. But it was the same year, right? It was 1982 for both of them, right?
Willow was much later.
Oh, it was 19. Yeah, okay.
It was, I think, 86 or 88.
88. All right. So it was 88. What I guess it was looking through at the other science fiction fantasy movies, and there was one in 82, one in 84, one in 86.
Yeah, there was
one in
there
88.
was also, I mean, Legend, and we just had the sci-fi fantasy like Kroll, which is one of my guilty pleasure favorites. There's a lot more of these things now that I think about it.
I did see Kroll. For some strange reason, I did see Kroll with the moving castle. And it's not Howl's
Yeah.
Moving Castle. It was just a moving castle. But when I was looking at these science fiction movies and comparing them, I saw that there was one every 2 years. It was interesting the way that the ones that I think were the big ones passed out. But so in 82, Tron came out, and I loved it, and I watched it, and it's great for me because I was like in my youth, and it was kind of ahead of its time. And they kind of sort of continue that story with Tron Legacy, but in a more modern setting. So I feel like that's what that series is to take that IP that you love and that story that you love and bring it into this new, bring it current with the technologies and things that we have. So when this movie starts, it's very Moses in the basket going down the river, like. There's a baby, there's a legend that this one baby will be the undoing of the queen, and it's super dark. I mean, this thing is a PG movie in 1988, but the whole thing opens up with this queen has gathered all of these pregnant women together, locked them in a basement, and as they in a dungeon, and as they have their babies, checking them for this like specific marking, and if they have it, she's gonna sacrifice the baby. Because the legend is that this baby will overthrow her or be her undoing. So when it happens and the thing starts out, I'm like, wow, this is already pretty dark. There were some other dark turns in it as well. But when they take the baby out and the woman's running and she puts it in the river and then gets attacked by those, there's got to be a name for them, and you're going to tell me what it is.
It is Death Dog. There's one right there.
The death dog. Okay, well here, let me open this up so that everybody can see if you've got. Where's that?
Yeah, these are some of the. We got these a couple years ago as a gift. Some of these were the original toys. Got General Kale and one of the Death Dogs.
Nice. So it also reminded me of something that was in Andor, that dog beast thing that like that was roaming the streets. But anyway, so those things tear her apart, and then Willow and his family find the baby, and then wackiness and adventure ensues. So, but again, by that point, it's been a super dark opening. As a kid, that didn't freak you out at all?
No, I mean, what was it, 88? I think wasn't I
Yeah,
watching like Die Hard at this point? Probably. Probably not something most 8-year-olds are going to be doing, but
yeah.
I
Okay,
was watching all the Nightmare on Elm Streets. Like I was not the kid who was going to get freaked out by those things.
okay. Well, again, like I said, it seemed a little bit weird and dark from the beginning. But then, you meet Willow and his family, and then they've got this, they've got a farm, and they're trying to, to do the best they can, and they realize that this baby means trouble, and he's like, "Ah, that's a human baby. We need to get rid of that and push it down the road." And then once they decide to take the baby on, then they fall in love with it, and then end up showing up with it at this festival where they're going to see if there will be a new sorcerer's apprentice, which I think is kind of funny. But the main sorcerer is played by Billy Barty, and gosh, man, I get so excited when I see Billy Barty just because of the whole Figment thing. I hear it; it's so fun. I mean, Billy Barty is always Billy Barty, whether he was in that Chevy Chase movie Foul Play or whether he was Figment. He was always the same voice. He wasn't doing anything
Yeah,
different. But it's just really neat that he was Figment.
yeah. No, he's unmistakable all the time.
Do you think that a lot of this crew was put together by the same like group of people that were in, Star Wars as Ugnaughts and Ewoks and all of that? Because it feels like some of them look very familiar sometimes that they might have been in these other movies. Obviously, Warwick Davis was in Star Wars as well, but
Yeah, I mean, they also did a couple of the Ewok movies in between then. So I think Lucasfilm probably had a little people like Rolodex somewhere at this point. I mean, I'm probably
oh,
guessing
Little
there's
People
just
Rolodex.
casting agents who specialize in it, like at certain times. Like, yeah, Time Bandits and all these other like things at the time that were doing the same thing.
Do you ever make a comparison with this and Lord of the Rings?
This is, I mean, it's almost so much the opposite of Lord of the Rings in that we have no lore, we have no like heavy canon that they're following. They're just like obviously it's one movie, so they were just making it up as they go, and they don't weigh us down on the history too much. It's like bad queen wants to kill the future empress and go.
Yeah.
Like,
I didn't understand a lot of the rules of how all that magic worked because obviously, there he wants to be a sorcerer, but really he's kind of just a cheap magician trying to work on his tricks. I don't know how he made the leap from being, I'm really good at sleight of hand that I should now be a sorcerer, but it seems like a different kind of magic. But some of the magic, like when he's trying to transform her back into her human self, and he's accidentally changes her into a crow or a goat. That seems like those spells on their own would have taken some pretty big talent, but I don't know. It's just interesting to see that
they get in,
magic kind of all over the place.
that is something that's covered a little bit in the series about magic in the person being channeled through like the wand or something. So that does come up in the series, and they kind of explore that a little bit.
Um, so let me talk a little bit about the cast. We mentioned it from the top, but Warwick Davis, I think does a decent job in here. But I think some of his supporting cast is kind of I don't think they're great actors, and I don't know whether it was the time or what. Even Val Kilmer overplays his part often, I feel like. And I
But I
assume you
think,
went back and rewatched it for this, yes?
oh yeah, and I think that's just Lucas writing. Like, I mean, I think, did Lucas write the full script or the story or whatever? But like all of his dialogue just has to be either played completely flat or over the top. Look at everything in Star Wars that he did and that he directed. Like Howard's a good director, but like one of the, at this time, it's how much over the shoulder was Lucas, and that was you know that was famous for what he did in like Return of the Jedi. Like, yeah, Marquand directed, but Lucas was over shoulder going, no, I don't like that.
Yeah.
So I don't really know how that worked on this set. With Howard was not the, I don't think he was that established of a director at this point. I don't know what he had directed up until now. I know he was,
No, he had done a few
goes
things.
back with Lucas for years.
I wondered if was his first thing, but I went back and looked at it, and he had done a few things before this. He had done about 10 things, some of them shorts, but before this happened. So,
Anything on
you
this scale, though?
I think so. I mean, I can look it up real quick, but I feel like he had. I feel like I wanted to talk about this as like maybe his like directorial debut, and it really wasn't. I mean, he had done quite a few things. I know that it was around the same time that he did Cocoon, but I can't remember if it was right before or right after.
Cocoon was like 85, I think.
Yeah, so that to me was a pretty big scale. Maybe not,
I forgot
you
he did
know,
Cocoon.
as
Because you
big,
can't buy
but
Cocoon on anything.
oh, you can't?
Cocoon's one of those
Uh,
movies that's just disappeared.
okay. Um, yeah, he's got quite the IMDb between all the producer stuff he did, the actor stuff that he did. But it looks like Willow was 88, Gung Ho, that horrible comedy, was 86, Splash was 84. That was a big deal, man.
Okay.
Splash was 84,
Yeah.
Cocoon 85. Night Shift feels like it was like his first real big deal, and that was the Henry Winkler, Michael Keaton movie. Um, this is Chuck reminding Bill to shut up. Did you ever watch that movie? Nobody? Just me? Great.
Years ago, I was just telling you beforehand, I'm going through creating my like letterbox catalog, and it's so many that I know I saw this. I can't remember a thing about it, but I remember watching it specifically.
Yeah. Well, and then after this one, he did some stuff like Far and Away. He did Parenthood, Backdraft, The Paper, like a lot of serious stuff. Apollo 13, Ransom, and then he did, of course, the 2000 Jim Carrey Grinch movie, Beautiful Mind, Cinderella Man, The Missing, Da Vinci Code, so on and so forth, all the way up towards more modern day with Solo, and he's got a few other things that are out now. So, I thought it was neat seeing him at Star Wars Celebration. They did this whole thing with the Industrial Light and Magic, and kind of talking about that documentary that's on Disney Plus, and he was in the building, and I just thought, how cool is this? I'm in the same room with Ron Howard, who has brought so many movies to the screen, as well as being Opie and Richie Cunningham. So, and the narrator for Arrested Development too. So he's done a lot of stuff in his career. It's kind of amazing, and the fact that he is somewhat tied to Lucas, as well as his daughter being somewhat tied to Lucas, is kind of cool.
I mean, I go beyond somewhat. Like back to American Graffiti, it was kind of like his film
Good point.
breakthrough. So
Yep. Nope. That's a good solid point. So again, I felt like some of the acting, and maybe you're right. Maybe it was dialogue from a George Lucas perspective, as opposed to the acting. But I thought some of it was a little bit off. One of the continuity things that bugged me, and maybe again, I'm no dentist, but the shot of him, meaning Val Kilmer,
Man
in the
Mardigan.
cage where his teeth are just nasty, caked on, and then there's a scene later when he's like doing the romantic scene, where he's quoting poetry, where they're just pearly whites, and I'm thinking, when did he stop and get that done?
He had a couple times he was trying to pick up the ladies in a bar, so maybe he did whatever they did to clean their teeth back then.
Sure, maybe. Um, and then the fact that they have Kevin Pollak in this as the one of the, I guess, what are they, brownies?
Brownies.
Um, that could have been a lot worse. That could have been a lot worse. Obviously it was done green screen. But for the time that must have been really. I think they really did a fair job for that at the time. I mean, obviously you see a couple things now where like the spirit kind of disappears a little bit because it's too thin, and they probably had to key it out. But there are some things in there with them that I thought were fairly well done. The actors walking in front of them and things like that.
Yeah, there's some scenes where the green screen looks really great, and then there's some scenes. Uh, I think like the big fight at is it Tirasleen, um, and then the abandoned castle fight where like there's the big dragon thing that they're fighting, and man, Mardigan's in front of it, and it just looks like, oh man, this is like Ray Harryhausen stuff.
Yeah, okay, all right. So that, I mean, I assume that's stop motion animation that they were doing, very practical, and
Yeah.
that didn't look great. I didn't get that whole scene, but we can talk about that in a minute. Um, the rest of the cast was fairly unknown, I believe, other than those. As I'm watching through the credits in the beginning, and I'm seeing, oh wow, Kevin Pollak's in this. I wonder what he is. And he, his part was fairly small, I think. But I feel like for the most part, most of the folks were unknown. We knew Warwick Davis from again from Star Wars at the time, even though he was in Masks and things like that. And then seeing Val Kilmer in this movie, he to me stands out as kind of like the star of this movie, just be like from a star power standpoint.
Yeah. Um, he's the character. I think he's Han Solo basically. Like he's Han Solo with the sword, and really kind of fits
That's
that
fair.
motif. And he really steals the movie to the fact that up here there's this book here. I want to get to the wide, so maybe it's in. Is I think the beginning of a trilogy that came out in the mid to late '90s, written by George Lucas and Chris Claremont, who's probably best well known for '80s X-Men and kind of creating the modern X-Men. And I was reading this along with a friend. We're both reading it, and he got ahead of me and just basically said, "Yeah, I don't think Matt Mardigan's in this at all." And I just stopped reading at that point because that's what I wanted to see.
Yeah. So he is basically, he's not only the star, but it's almost like the center point of it. And that's a great comparison to say, like, that he is the Han Solo of this. He's like the unwilling, like he just wants to save his own skin, but he gets wrapped up in their story and their mission and their goals, um and ends up being their champion in so many ways. Um, there's a lot of other things that happen along the trail. They once they meet up with him, and the rest of their crew goes back to the village, and it's just basically Willow and the two brownies and the Val Kilmer. Then it's just like now they're going. It's like this journey movie, this road movie, for them to head through and get to this lake where this fairy has told them they need to take this wand and to this great sorceress, and they get to the lake, and it's just this dead village. It doesn't really tell us. You were talking about there not really being a backstory. It doesn't really tell us what killed this little village because there's skulls and burned things and all that kind of stuff. Is there something in the lore about what had happened there?
I think just from some of the dialogue, we get the impression that Bavmorda is having Kale and Sorsha just kill everything in sight. Like they're just out to conquer everything and just kill everyone in their way. That's the only impression I ever got of what happened to anybody in this, because they talk about uh, like a couple different towns that are just gone. Like the castle we see, Tirasleen was supposed to have just been recently been like a force to be reckoned with, and they've been cut down to nothing.
Yeah. That's a good point. But that scene seemed very strange to me because okay, they get to the beach, they get to the village, and then Willow, having protected this baby for so long, lays her down amongst the skulls and the everything else. And it's like, hey, I'll be back in a minute. I'm gonna hop in this boat and go over to this island here. No big deal. Mad Mardigan has already left at that point. And so it just feels weird that he would just leave the baby there, lying there on the beach to go get in this boat. Takes the boat over to what is basically the equivalent of Discovery Island and Bay Lake. It's just this little random island that he can see. You can almost see that there's really nothing on it. He gets there. What is the animal that she's been turned into?
Was she a sugar glider?
I always picture sugar gliders like this. She was like,
Um, I don't know. Does Wikipedia say anything on that one?
I don't know. I just thought that was weird. And then she's talking to him, and she's like, I've been turned into, I need to be turned back into my human form. And so they get back on the boat and they head back over. And then all of a sudden, in this just remote village on the beach, I guess Mad Mardigan had sold them out, then brought back Sorcha and the crew, and now they're going to take the baby. And so that happens a lot, that the baby gets taken.
I mean, that's standard fantasy action is rescue, escape, rescue, escape is kind of the plot of these things.
That makes sense. I don't care for it.
According to Google, Finn Rizal was a gray possum when we met her.
Interesting.
Didn't quite look it, but
yeah, I don't know. It's just again, to your point earlier, there's not a lot of reference to this. It was almost like this movie took place in a bubble. Like that there's no like deep history, or I mean, we kind of some of those things are unraveled as time goes on about how special this wand is and the rivalry between the two great sorceresses, and but I feel like they didn't explain enough to us. This movie is 2 hours long, but it is quite a journey from beginning to end, and I don't think it seemed to slow down the whole time. I mean, they really kind of take you from catastrophe to catastrophe.
yeah, I mean, you got you got a kind of a slow lead up. At the second, like you meet Mad Mardigan, and then and then Willow gets kidnapped by the brownies. Everything just there's the escape from the bar. There's them getting captured again at the lake. Then there's the escape down the mountain, and the battle at Tiraslee, and the battle at I can't even remember all the names. At Bavmorda's castle, Nocturna or something like that.
Yeah. One of the things I would have liked to have seen after this was over, and I may be jumping ahead a little bit and doing that, is like special features. I assume this thing, is 35 years old this year, right? 88,
Yeah,
23.
this is one of the anniversary DVD, like right the last edition before Blu-ray came out, I think. And I'm looking to see what's on here. It's got a making of, which I probably saw when this thing came out, but I don't really remember much. So,
Yeah.
but there are some making ofs out there.
But again, this is something I come back to again and again with Disney Plus, is there's a lot of material on a lot of these movies that they should just dump onto there. When you go to special features on this, it's just clip is all it says. So it's not even the original trailer. It's just a clip from the movie. Like, how hard is that to do?
I mean, it's the same even when you buy a lot of these things through iTunes. They say they have like iTunes extras, but like half of them like are missing the commentaries that they recorded on all the different editions, and all that. And I like that stuff, and that's why I still have, a couple thousand DVDs or Blu-rays sitting upstairs, because a lot of those things, even though I own most of those movies on digital, I want to make sure I get those special features.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, right behind me, you can see all of these things are DVDs. And I've had my daughter ask me, like, why do you still have DVDs? And I'm like, well, first of all, some of these things are not available on streaming. Some of the movies that are the bigger movies are not available on streaming because they still want you to pay for them here and there. Secondly, I think you're right. There's a lot of stuff that's special edition, which is the thing I loved about DVDs when they first came out, is that they had director's commentary, and they had, bonus features and deleted scenes and all this other stuff that you're like, if it's a movie you loved, you bought it, and you could kind of piece together, like, what did they cut out, what was originally supposed to be in there, what was the director's vision here. I watched so many director's commentaries, which, by the way, my favorite one ever was Muppets from Space. Had one where it was like Mystery Science Theater style, where you could see the silhouettes of the guys in the theater, the Muppets watching it and giving their own commentary. But I wish there was more of that stuff available on Disney Plus. They put some on sometimes, but it just doesn't ever feel like enough.
They do it for the originals, but not for stuff that's in a catalog. And I mean, hey, Disney, I'll take a job just with a couple. Give me a couple computers with a couple drives, and I'll just rip this stuff and put it out for you. If it's out there, might as well just put it on the service. It's not going to cost you anything than like a little bit of labor.
Yeah, I'll hire you. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. I'll make a phone call. We just need there to be more of this stuff available, I feel like. So again, when I'm watching this in the chat, a lot of people are like, I really couldn't follow this, or I think Jarrett said just really couldn't get into it. Did you feel like, and this is not me asking you for your final review because you'll give that at the end, but when you were watching it during this time, did you feel like, oh, this is a little slower than I thought it was, or were you like, this holds up pretty well?
I think as I said, it's a little slow to start, but once it gets going, it's just a constant ride, and I think that's not the problem. I think, as we're saying, is like, we're now used to having things a little more laid out for us with the lore, because modern fantasy movies are Potter and Lord of the Rings, and they're just steeped in lore. Even if even if it wasn't all there on the first iteration of it, we see it as it comes on, and we get things explained to us. This, and even, as I said, even bits of the TV series, like, don't, like, I know we're not reviewing the series, but like, we talk about a lot of the Star Wars shows. Those first couple episodes are a bit of a drag because they're trying to explain something to us, and then we get the action. I think we could have used more of that in the Willow series, and to fill in some of the stuff we never learned in this movie.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, you cool if I ask you a couple trivia questions? I feel like you'll know them better than I will.
Let's see. I mean, it's not like I don't usually look at those background things too much, but
No, this isn't. I'm not getting real backgroundy here. There's just a couple things that I thought you would probably know. So what did you say Finn Brazil was turned into in the first one? What was that?
it said a great possum. I thought it was something more like a sugar glider or something like that, or a bilby.
So here's a picture of that. So
it doesn't
what?
look like a possum's tail to me.
No, it doesn't. It does. I agree with you. Like, it looks like an oversized sugar glider, but I always thought sugar gliders were smaller. So I don't know. What are the next three things she's turned into before she's turned into a human?
There's the crow, the goat, and the other one's briefer, right?
Yeah.
Because he goes through
Actually,
two at
there's
once.
four.
No.
There's four things. Sorry.
So there's the crow is the first one. The goat is I can't remember them now.
Then there's an ostrich, a turtle, and a tiger.
Yes.
And a peacock. Sorry, there's one more, and a peacock.
Yeah, when he's just rolling through everything.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. The goat was like the last kind of, I mean, and Neko's saying goat. That was one of the last like ones that lasted, I think, because the crow lasted a while, and then the goat lasted a while, and then she was like, "Hey, you got to turn me," and then it was this whole thing about trying to work on it and get her turned into the right thing. It's funny to me though in there where she's like. Val Kilmer's like, well, what do you look like when you're, turned into human? She's like, I'm a young, beautiful woman, because she's apparently lost track of time. But you can hear it in her voice. It's definitely an older woman's voice.
Yeah.
And by the way, Neko's correcting me that it wasn't a crow, it was a rook. I don't know the difference.
I can't tell a blackbird from a crow from a raven other than size
From a sugar
usually.
glider, from a possum, from a yeah. No, that's fine. I get it. Um, the brownies carry a special kind of dust. What do they call that dust?
They say it. I know it's the love dust, but it's a long name and I can't remember what it like. It's something of something, but
No,
I
I
can't
mean,
remember it.
yeah, dust of broken hearts. Which it
Yeah.
feels like it's pixie dust, and that like when you see it, but it's kind of a love potion thing. It seems weird, a weird pull that that's the thing they would have, but obviously that's the thing that puts the catalyst together for Mad Mardigan to hit on Sorsha and like lose his mind temporarily about the fact that she's evil. Um, what did Kaya give Willow before he left on his quest?
A braid of hair.
Correct. That is absolutely correct. What is Willow's last name?
Upgood.
That is also correct. And then I have one more that I'm not sure if you will know the answer to this one or not. What are Willow's children's names?
Mira and something that begins with an R.
Close. Do you want me to tell you?
Yeah, I don't know. It's Mira or Miri or something like that.
Mims.
Mims? Okay.
Yeah, Mims and Ranon, Ranon, are the names. So, yeah, there wasn't a lot of like street addresses and bus numbers and license plates for me
Yeah.
to zoom in on that kind of thing. So, I just was trying to get some of that, but it takes me back to a thought that I have about this because I watch a ton of movies, and you do as well. But I don't read a lot of books. I've read books. I don't read a lot of books for enjoyment. I watch movies for enjoyment. That's what I do. But there's a lot of these where they, because these are made up words and made up names because it's fantasy. Sometimes have a hard time like getting up with what people's names are. I don't. Do you ever have that, or do you always just know it?
No, there's definitely a lot of stuff like I don't remember. Like I'm halfway through the show and I think I know most of the characters' names that of on the like traveling party, but like somebody that comes and goes, I don't remember. In a lot of shows, like um, even things like the newer Star Treks, like until like season three, like they didn't mention half the Discovery crew's names, and like I and when they do mention them, they're some of them are alien or definitely there is one has an African name. I couldn't. I think it's a go away. Like they didn't mention like until they didn't get episodes focused on them for 3 seasons, but they're on every other episode. You just don't like remember who they are, and I think that's just something that happens to a lot of side characters in these kind of epic things. Not just because they're fantasy names. I think it's just because you don't focus on things close enough. Like Kale, Sorsha, Mardigan, Willow, Bavmorda. That's uh, and then I know there's the blonde guy. We get his name. We get the brownies names. Uh, Roselle, but like a lot of the like there's some other people that are named. You just don't. And I mean, I probably only know these because I've watched the movie 30 times or whatever it is now.
Do you think you've actually watched it 30 times?
Over the last 33 years, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I know
Okay.
I've watched it. I watched it right before the series started airing. I watched it yesterday, so.
And when you watch it, are you mostly watching it so that you can catch Val Kilmer without a shirt on? Is that basically why?
If I was
No.
going to do that, I would just throw on Top Gun, honestly. Um,
That's fair. That's fair.
uh, no, it's one of those movies because I have seen so many times. I do like when I'm working. and I want to put something on in the background. It's something I don't have to pay attention to. So this is one of those things that does come up in that rotation sometimes.
Gotcha. Okay. So when he's fighting, this is when Willow's like, "Oh, you really are a good fighter." This is one of those times where he like shines those pearly whites, and it's like, "Oh, okay, something happened along the way, where he's now, he he hit up the dentist or something happened. I don't know, but I assume that Val Kilmer had to do a decent amount of like sword work because he doesn't do so bad with not only the fighting but also like the throwing it over his head and doing the twirls and things with it. So I don't know. I think
Yeah,
he
I mean
he
they
kind of emerges as a big deal swordsman, right?
at some point, Lucas had to have had a sword trainer on a lot of these movies for fighting choreography. So I'm assuming he just had another one on call.
Yeah, get one on retainer. They try to escape this with the baby in tow, with what clearly would have killed that baby. I mean,
There's a
this
lot of things
escape
that
down the
clearly would
hill,
have killed that baby.
but I'm just saying this escape down the hill. I'm like, there is no way any of them survive that. Some of the like the big jump off the top. I mean, and then the goofy like uh rolling up like a a snowball coming down the hill, and then that thing would have leveled that house. No.
Yeah. Um,
So like this thing
hard to
right
say. I'm
here,
trying to
as Mad Mardigan is like, apparently in that, and he's rolled up in it, and it's caused this huge snowball that's headed towards that hut, which is twice the size of it. It feels like it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and it's a perfect cylinder, which I remember
Right.
even.
Yeah.
I remember like
And
watching that one of the first times as an adult. I'm like, wait a minute.
yeah, and everybody survives perfectly. It's fine. Um, I don't know. It's just that's one of those where it kind of takes me out of it because it's like, okay, I was with you along the way here, but then like this comically large snowball roll, with Val Kilmer in the middle of it rolling towards the thing is a little bit off. Um, but this is another one of those situations where they had just gotten away from they got caught with the baby by the lake. The baby, they take him up into the hills, the snow covered hills, and then they make their way down back into the village. They get away by capturing Sorsha, and then on the way lose her to the castle. Once they get there, they kind of like lock themselves in, get ready for battle. But one of the things that I thought was weird too is they close the gates, and the gates look like I could push them down with my hands. Like those two gates to the castle where he does that and gets it like closed just in case, like just as those people are coming, and throws this very rotted, flimsy board in between. And so they decide to cut down the biggest tree I've ever seen in my entire life so they can use it as a battering ram. I feel like if they had just taken two or three of them and run into it, it would have broken, no?
Uh, from experience, trying to break down a door is harder than it seems sometimes.
So you're saying I'm a little bit off on that one. That's fine. I just looked at it and I was
I
like,
mean,
that.
I mean, old railroad ties always look like they're old and dilapidated, and what's stronger than you think?
But it was one of these things where it's not really a railroad tie, and he picks it up like it's nothing, and he takes it over to drop it in there, and they're almost like just standing at the front of the gate, ready to push it open at that point. Anyway, I just thought that was a little bit weak.
Yeah, I mean, the battering ram might have been a bit much. It would probably could have held him for a minute, but you're right. Looking at that,
However,
that's
I do think it's interesting. Like it never occurred to me. Like you're not going to haul a battering ram around with you. The fact that their initial instinct is, hey, go get a tree. We're going to knock this thing down, and they just like go at it and go through the motion and get it done. It just still to me seemed a little bit far fetched. Which again, it doesn't always have to be like perfectly make sense, but I think things need to follow certain rules when you're watching them. That's why I had some issues with the magic. Like, how did he accidentally take this troll and turn it into this gigantic two-headed thing? I
when
mean,
I was younger, I always thought it was something to do with what it fell into, but like obviously it's starting to turn into it before it falls into. I guess it's just water, but
Yeah.
Like, it's the same transformation spell he's using on Roselle that he can't seem to get working. So maybe he was trying to turn into a sugar glider.
Does this thing look almost like a two-headed rancor?
Um, Definitely a little bit with like a very flat rhinoceros horn on top of it.
Almost like the cross between a Ronto and a rancor with the long neck. But, you know.
Yeah,
And so this is where Sorsha sees him fighting, and he's amazing, and she kind of decides to fall for him, and now she's in that mode where she's, going to fulfill the prophecy of betraying her mother, the evil queen. Um, every movie's got to have an evil queen, man. You can't have a good movie without it. The other thing that I thought was
yeah.
interesting was when they're trying to figure out what to do. They've gathered their troops. The baby's been taken, and they chase after the baby. But they get to the queen's castle, and it's all they've pulled up the gate. They decide to camp out there. They realize that there's not going to be much they can do. The queen turns them all into pigs. They get turned back into humans. They come up with this plan. There are guards at this gate. Go with me on this, Ron. There are guards at this gate
Oh, I had the
at the
same
top,
thought every time
and
I
they're
watched it.
watching everything these folks are doing. They didn't see them build or dig, I don't know, 20, maybe 15 holes in the ground overnight. They didn't catch any of that happening.
Uh, yeah, I have no idea. Maybe it was a dark night. I mean, they didn't have floodlights on the castle.
Yeah, I guess so. And then there's a scene where, like, at that point, I didn't know where everybody was, what their plan was. I didn't get it. I mean, I hadn't been standing at the top of the castle watching what was going to go on. And so there's this moment where Willow says to himself, "Oh, come on, Willow, be brave." And what his brave moment is, he bangs his walking stick on the drum. What was he ramping up for there? I don't know. Am I being too
Just
critical, Ron?
battle.
You could tell me.
I think he's just ramping up for battle. Like he knows what's coming. Like if that's a
Yeah.
signal to start it.
I mean, it was a great plan. Don't get me wrong, the idea of doing that, but I just don't feel like no one would have noticed them digging these huge holes with these large tarps that were their tents.
Yeah, even if you can, I mean, if I'm just trying to think, like if they had torches on the battlements, you can't see through the dark like that way. Who knows? But they
Yeah.
also might not have been looking too hard. As far as they knew, everybody was turned into a pig and gone.
I'd like to know what happened. So the baby is inside, and they've taken their sweet time. They know these folks are at the gates, and they've taken their sweet time in fulfilling this enchantment, which is going to send this baby's soul to the underworld, basically. Um, and they strap the baby up, and it looks like they've actually done that to this baby. Would we CGI this in 2023 rather than actually doing this, or? I mean, this baby's actually crying. This is tough for me to watch.
I mean, the wrap is not that different from a swaddle.
Well, she looks like she's wrapped in something evil.
She looks like she's crying, but I mean, like the actual wrap is not too far from what you do to an infant. So
Yeah. Okay. I do like the look of Sorsha's armor. That it's almost this, like Shogun warrior situation.
yeah, it seems to be a mix of uh, like late Japanese medieval and like Celtic at times. So
Yeah.
it's like uh, and well, I mean, look at the stuff Lucas would crib from Star Wars. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Okay.
And Star
Um,
Wars was a ripoff of what Seven Samurai and Last Fortress. So
no, you take that back. Um, So
or
the
Hidden
other thing
Fortress. I'm
about
sorry.
this is the score is by, and I mentioned this earlier, by James Horner. I always thought that if George Lucas was doing something, whether he wrote it or whatever, that it was always going to be a John Williams joint. So I was surprised that this was not a John Williams thing. Were you?
I I actually didn't realize it wasn't until recently, but you hear it and it's not. It's not that it doesn't have those kind of bombastic horns. I mean, maybe Williams was busy. This is about the same, like a little before Last Crusade, Spielberg churning out thing after thing. Like maybe they just didn't get him, or maybe Howard didn't want him.
Yeah,
Howard did Howard use him for Cocoon, like use Horner for Cocoon and things like that?
I think so. Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
not that like, I mean, it's not much of a step down, or even like, I'm not gonna say it's a lateral step because Williams might be the best there was, but I mean,
no, no,
is
it's
he's
good.
still
I just
good.
was surprised. It's kind of like if Tim Burton did something without Danny Elfman. I mean,
Yeah.
I was surprised that that was a thing. The one last thing that I have is that when the queen is doing her spells, she is aging quickly. Do we have any knowledge as to what is causing that? Is it just taking her life force to make this spell happen?
Um, I don't like. There's a there could be a little bit of some explanation of who she was really working for that comes up in the show, that maybe she was channeling too much, but I'm not gonna.
Not going to spoil that. Yeah, that, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, the goodness prevails. Willow is able to use his sleight of hand to save the day, and the evil queen is whisked away in a very end of Raiders of the Lost Ark type, stripped to the bone and sent to the netherworld sort of a situation. Everybody's
In a
happy,
way, I
and
still don't understand, and I think they kind of reference it in the show, like she just kind of did it to herself. Like
the thing that
she
she was planning
lost
on doing to the
concentration
baby.
of the spell. Yeah, and what was supposed to happen to the baby happened to her.
Yeah. It does seem a little bit strange the way that it works, but it reminded me of that scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark where they everything kind of gets stripped away from them, and their flesh, their blood, everything goes away, and they get basically turned to ash. But she ends up going into this red smoke and going away forever. Um,
Right, and part of the lore, I'm not. This is not. This they discuss in the show, is the baby has. They can't just kill the baby. It has to be banished to another plane, or her soul will reincarnate and still be a threat.
right.
So she was actually trying to shift the baby to another dimension, and I guess whatever little fit of anger she had just kind of turned herself into the target.
Yeah, I guess that's what happened. But I again, you've seen this 30 times. I've seen it once, so I thought maybe you might have a little bit of a different angle on it than I did. But again, what we see is what's there in the movie, because again, until now they're apparently, according to the things that I've heard you kind of mention, the new series is sort of trying to explain some of the things that maybe they left on the table from the first telling of it. So, when this
And
thing
maybe
wraps
not as
up.
well as they could.
Oh, really? Okay,
This,
hold that thought.
I
Hold that thought. I have a
yeah.
second. Well, thought about that, because as this one wraps up, everything is like it's a happy ending. They give Willow a nice book. He's very excited about it. They put him on a pony. They send him on his way. He goes back to the village. They do the Ewok dance. They're done. Um, so once this is over, that was it. It was done. This was a one shot, as opposed to Lucas doing Star Wars and doing so many of them, or Raiders and doing so many of them. This was just a one and done. Now that there's a series, I think that's cool. But can you look at any reason why this would have been just a one and done for him, as opposed to the other ones being trilogies or beyond?
I don't think it did amazing at the box office.
That's fair. Okay.
And Lucas wasn't, obviously he was kind of done directing for a while. Um, and yeah, just they, as I said, they tried to do like a trilogy novelization in the '90s that weren't big books. They, as I said, like Chris Claremont wrote it with Lucas. Like Lucas is credited as the first writer on it, but I think it switches in the two other ones, which I never got. But I think it just it's I mean it's a I only think I really love it as much as part of it being in as a kid. I think it's still a decent movie, but I don't think it warranted a franchise until the people who grew up on it demanded it.
Right. Um, and then at the very end, as like I said, they kind of have this like village. Everybody gets excited and has a dance thing when he comes back as a triumphant hero. But they fade out, and then all of a sudden the credits hit. And when the credits hit, there's this weird song, and I didn't look into it any further than the fact that it sounds like a Blues Traveler song, just out of the blue, just like it almost sounds like Runaround. So I don't know. It
Well,
was that weird choice.
then you'll love the show because that's been one a lot of people's complaints is they put in at the end of every credit is a kind of indie modern indie take on like an older song. And to me in the show was very jarring.
Wow.
uh
Well, and here's the show we're talking about is Willow, and the eighth episode and final episode for the season just dropped today. So it's it's interesting. I'm now that I've seen the movie and I have a frame of reference, I will definitely watch this series. I wasn't necessarily wanting to watch it until I had seen the original. Um, but do you think that if, and again, don't want any spoilers, but if you're a huge fan of the original movie, you have your own thoughts about Willow the series, and maybe we'll talk about that another time. But from what you've watched with the series, do you feel like you had to have watched the Willow movie to enjoy this series?
yeah, there's
Really?
definitely it's constant references to you. It is a direct sequel, like
Okay.
30 years later,
Interesting.
maybe
Okay.
20 years later in the show. But yeah,
All right, before we wrap, and again, thank you guys for watching with us. We appreciate it. If you have not, please give us a like. We want everybody to find the show. We're going to be back next week with Patrick Hackett. We're going to talk about Herbie Goes Bananas. I know that's the one that everybody's been dying to see is Herbie Goes Bananas, and so please join us for that one. But I'm a huge Herbie fan. I'm just going to admit that. But when is there anything before we wrap this up that you wanted to point out that I didn't get to here, or are you ready to administer your final decision?
I mean, I can't really think of anything that since I think it's the magic's inconsistent, but I think the magic's inconsistent in every fantasy story. Like magic is too much of a catch-all to have it. It just has to be the Deus Ex Machina and work just. It has to work against plot armor at the time, and I mean, the,
Plot armor.
what does Gandalf? What does he do for 3 movies as a wizard? Really, he casts like 2 spells the whole time.
He was just biding his time until he could take down Professor X. Um, okay, so we've watched this. You've watched it multiple times, especially recently. There's a new series out, but just based on this movie alone, and again, like I said, just because I liked Tron as a kid doesn't mean I'm going to recommend the original 1982 Tron because it is very there's a lot of issues with it in 2023 that it just doesn't. I feel like it doesn't hold up. So I'm specifically asking about Willow the movie. Ron Deanna, would you recommend this movie?
I still would. I don't think I'm gonna, give it the highest praise and said it's the most amazing movie ever. But I don't think there's a question that it's a fun romp for the 2 hours you're there. You do have some fun characters. Uh, it's not something I want to recommend you sit down, think too hard about, and try and go into some sort of like film school, uh, dissection on. It's a good fun movie to sit down and watch, and I think that's what you really kind of a lot of sword and sorcery movies should be.
Gotcha. Well, you know what? I again, this was the first time I had watched it. I feel like it's one that I should have watched. I feel like based on some of the comments in the comments in the comments, I everybody thinks that you should have watched this movie. I do think it's kind of one of those required watching movies. I agree with you. It's not a Back to the Future one. It's not a Jurassic Park. It's not one of those major things. And I think it probably meant more to you if you watched it as a kid, and it meant, and it was part of your like childhood and growing up. We have so many options now when it comes to content that it really does get hard to figure out what you need to watch and what you don't. I think that this one though is one that is so much a part of our society that I would recommend you watch it. I do think it stands up, but I probably wouldn't pick it as one of the top fantasy movies, but I do think it held my attention for 2 hours, and I enjoyed watching it. So we definitely want to hear from you in the comments below. Tell us what you thought of the movie. Did you grow up with it? Do you love it? I've already seen some comments about I couldn't make it all the way through. But I'd recommend watching it, especially now that there's new content with the series and it's so predicated on you having seen the original. I think it's almost like do your due diligence, watch the 2 hour movie before you watch a season, or I'm sure two, of Willow coming up. So thank you guys again for being with us tonight. We hope you enjoyed it. Hope you join us again for Deep in the Plus next Wednesday night, and we'll be going bananas. So Ron, my friend, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And y'all have a great week, and we'll see you soon.